like, I hid it under my shirt, and I had my flashlight, and I just read, and it was this time of peace because I knew that no one was gonna bother me. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional because it's one of the things that kept me from unaliving myself. Hi, my friends, fiends, and unsavory beans. Welcome to another video. I wanted to talk about how I figured out that I was autistic. But before I even get to that point, I wanted to share all the ways I should have known that I was autistic all along. I hope you find this to be a interesting video, and I am being a little vulnerable talking about some really personal stuff. So if you like that type of content, hit subscribe. Anyway, I was a wee lass that really didn't understand how to social. I think that's a very common autistic experience. People describe like everyone having a book that you don't have. But for me, it was that I had the book, but there were none of the pages filled out. I felt like I was like Devon Attenborough, observing the fellow humans, trying to ascertain how to social. Like, that is how I existed for a lot of my childhood. I was constantly othered. I felt like I was a whole nother species. And that was this clear indicator that I was autistic if someone would have been able to, like, actually help me. Another was I related to kids that I knew were autistic. Sometimes they were my friends and I enjoyed hanging out with them and it was a lot of fun. But, well, I guess I wouldn't say they're my friends. They were people I hung out with. There was still this disconnect because I didn't really know how to have friends. But I digress. They were kids that I hung out with, but then there were, as I got older and started to level up and have more written down in like my book, I distanced myself from them somewhat like on purpose, but also like I had this self cringe inside. Like I instinctively knew there was something different between me and them. Like I could feel the similarity, but I was able to play the game better than them. I was like, why aren't you just doing the social? Why you can see that X means X and Y means Y. Like it's so obvious to me, but I cringed when I saw them try to interact with the people. And that sense of cringe made me realize that there was a similarity there that I should have explored. Actually, I kind of suspected that there might be something like that because of that similarity, but because I could do the things, I didn't think that I was autistic. This is going back to a earlier one, but when idioms like apple of his eyes or it's raining cats and dogs, like I had to use my intelligence to figure out like a computer really fast what the context was around those types of idioms because I didn't understand them at first. I was like, "What do you mean apple of his eye? Like is it there like an apple in his eye?" Like I didn't quite understand. And then I was like, "Oh, it's like the brightness and like, oh, he he feels proud. Okay, that's the context. Cool, cool. I understand the idiom now." And that was the types of things that like I had to use my intelligence to compensate for being autistic. Oh, when I was really, really young, I got sad that characters in media were not real. Like, because I didn't really have friends, characters in media became my friends. When I was at my youngest age, it was probably the Rugrats. I related to them. It felt like I was part of a friend group in like my mind, like palace or whatever, because like I could play different scenarios that weren't in the show. I could understand how other humans interacted. And on one level, I knew it wasn't real, but on the other level, well, I was like, and this is kind of the magical thinking that's associated with being autistic when you're a young autist, is that I figured, well, surely they must be like real out there somewhere. And then they're just like writing about these kids, right? Like, that's what it must be. But as I got older, to truly understand that no, they're not like, it's just characters, that made me sad. However, I did use this as a strength in my darkest period when I was in middle school. This is when when I say I had no friends, I had no friends. I had people that I talked with, I had people that I interacted with, but there was no intimacy because I was bullied to such extreme levels, which another indicator that I'm autistic. People had to be kind of like, nope, I'm not gonna like touch her. She's like, I need to keep her at arm's length. That was how I was treated because kids can tell that you're different, and I was treated differently because queer and trans and didn't know it and all of that, but also because of my neurotype. And so my friends at the time, they were way more casual than I would have liked because of the bullying, like kept that intimacy from being able to happen. So and I know this is going to sound bad because of current events or whatever, but it was my truth. The Harry Potter characters were my only friends that I felt like I had any closeness with, and I don't remember if I have told this story, but my mom see other videos about me talking about what she did to me, but one of the true moments of peace I had as a child was she forced me to walk the dogs in the middle of the night for some reason. I don't really understand why. As an adult, I have theories, but it had something control. But I didn't want to do that. A rebellious kid, like, I'm going to fight you for making me do this silly thing that isn't really fair. I took a Harry Potter book out from under, like, I hid it under my shirt, and I had my flashlight, and I just read. And it was this time of peace because I knew that no one was going to bother me. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional because it's one of the things that kept me from unaliving myself when I was so isolated, was these times of peace and comfort connecting to these people that kept me sane. And I just hit my headset. Oh my god, okay. I get so freaking sad that this cruel woman that doesn't understand what her books meant to closeted, queer, trans, other minority, like, people, and then she uses it for hate. I know that, like, I don't have a public relationship with the books anymore because of that. Like, they're, buy another book, etc. I know, but it just still hurts, okay? Like, okay, hold on. I'm gonna take a minute and come back. Okay. Thank you. So, treating characters like they're people is an autistic trait. It's that having that increased empathy for, like, objects is is an autistic trait. I remember I was helping someone clean their house, and I was told to, like, you know, clean out an entire area, and I took that literally. So I just kind of were piling things in our dumpster that we were using, and I accidentally got rid of something that I shouldn't gotten rid of. And the person, who was also autistic, got super duper upset because it was like he was losing his friends because he too was isolated in his youth, and his toys, his action figures were his friends. And I wish that you know, that loneliness where these objects or fictional characters or whatever it was didn't have to be the thing that kept us grounded. But that's another indicator I was autistic and he was. Let's see. So, you might have heard me describe the concept of top down thinking versus bottom up thinking. Bottom up thinking is where you notice tree, 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 but you don't see that it's a forest. That's the way that I move through the world. Whenever there was a new social situation, it was like I entered the matrix and I was like, let me look down into the code. Let me see all of the details about the situation as fast as I can. And I could do that. I could like compensate. It was fairly easy to do that sort of thing, but it takes a toll over time, especially as you grow and you get in more and more new situations all at once. It can burn you out. And as I became an adult, I made my world smaller, so I didn't have to do that as often. Another indicator that I was autistic, although isn't exclusive to being autistic, was my relationship with food. I struggled greatly to eat food that had different textures, that were not uniform. I, am a chicken nugget autistic, or was. I still am for when I need to be for comfort, but when I was youngest, I didn't have the ability to be anything but. Actually, getting strongly suggested that I should leave my house at 19 was the thing that made me not be as such a picky eater, because I always felt like I was borderline homeless. I was renting rooms, but I could always tell that the situation was tenuous. I had no renter protections or whatever. I could go be like asked to hit the road jack at any time. And I knew that. So I worked in a deli, and whenever there was food that didn't get picked up, or say like I had to throw away stuff from the salad bar, I would kind of try to like squirrel that away so I could like cut my grocery bill. And that means I was eating a lot of textures that I usually couldn't tolerate, but it was calories and it was a sensory nightmare, frankly, because I just didn't like it. But eventually I grew to be able to tolerate it. The fact that that was such a struggle was another indicator that I was autistic. When I had to interact with new systems, there was that sense of distress that I was talking about before, and it made it difficult to feel like I knew my place. I remember having a sense of, well, I can do anything, so what should I do? Like, after I graduated college, I just was aimless. Part of that was the gender dysphoria hole, but the other part was like, I didn't understand how the world worked well enough in order to figure out how to navigate my way through in order to function. And it wasn't until I got back in graduate school and back into a framework of where I like felt like I understood what I was supposed to do, because I was always good at school. I knew what school was, and I started feeling happy again after I got back in because I knew what I was supposed to do. And that was that, like, this sense of comfort because I understand the world and the systems around me better, was another indicator that I was autistic. You're gonna hear me say that over and over and over and over and over and over again, because there was so much in my life that should have tipped me off, but because I got good grades, or because I could, like, you know, do other things, like I could hold down a job even if it was hard. Like, these are all things that, because I could do that, I wasn't that way. Because I was told that if you're autistic, you, like, can't hold a job, you can't pay taxes, like all that BS that RFK said in that one speech in recent months. Like, that was my understanding of what it meant to be autistic. So I can, if I can do those things, then clearly I'm not that, right? 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 No. No. Oh, gosh. But now let me actually say how, despite all of the things I've listed, and there's so many more, those are just the ones that I can think of off the top of my head, I am sure. I could probably get into stuff I've said before about how I interface with gender or whatever. Like, the list goes on and on. And the reason I listed those things wasn't to say, like, if you check all of the things that Ria, like, experienced, that you're also autistic. But these are things that we don't quite get the practical experience of what it means to be autistic. And so I wanted to share my experiences. So if you're struggling with trying to figure that out about yourself, you can bring it up to your therapist. Like, you can use it to inform your own exploration as you research it. Because, oh, you want another reason why you could be autistic? If you constantly research autism to determine if you're autistic, that could be an indicator if you are that. I feel like there are so many people that I see or come to me in my social life that are like, I just keep reading about this and like it kind of fits and it kind of doesn't. And I don't know. But like, if you have this drive to look this up, it's an indicator. But how this actually happened actually has to do with ADHD first. So, insert Ria. She is in her community mental health era where she's helping those with the most need with the least experience, for her being a therapist, because that's how we structure our system, by the way. The people with the most need deal with the least inexperienced therapists because that's just how it is. It's really sad, at least in the United States. But anyway, I'm working with these small children who have ADHD because ADHD correlates with poverty. I'm working with people on Medicaid or our state insurance for children. And I'm like, okay, wow, there's a lot of ADHD. Huh, that's interesting. I really relate to your experiences. Well, and so I got diagnosed, and it made the community mental health struggle better. And to give additional context, when you're in community mental health, you get pushed to have more clients and more clients and more clients because they want to wring out as much money as they can from you. Additionally, you only get paid for when you're in session. So all of the documentations, note writing, other shenanigans they make you do to ensure that the insurance like works and pays out and all of that, I didn't get paid for it. I made about as much as I made when I was in a deli, when I was a just out of school therapist. That was how difficult it was to exist then. And you just have all of this pressure to do more and more. And, we talk about navigating systems, right? Like I was before. I felt like I had to do what they said or I was a failure. Something was wrong with me if I couldn't keep up. Really, I was being exploited and I knew that. And a concept called PDA, Profile of Autism, which stands for either pathological demand avoidance, if you want to be more clinical about it, or persistent drive for autonomy, if you want to use the community's version of that acronym. It basically just means that we don't like when people control us if we don't understand, like, the reasons why. A lot of these systems, they just will tell you, do it because I said so. But why, though, is my natural inclination. if I don't understand why, I don't want to do it. And that was really hard to overcome because when you work with insurance, there's all of these arbitrary things that you just have to fill out because it does some magic proof other than the person should just be struggling with what they have and that should just be covered. But we live under capitalism, so you have to create all of these documents just to get something covered because they have to really have the thing. It can't be that they're just experiencing symptoms and you help treat them with those symptoms and all of those things. You have to prove that they have it by listing all of this verbose reasons that they have what they have in order for it to get covered. At least in the system that I was in, it's because the insurance doesn't want to pay out. So you have to do everything to the double degree, essentially. If you want to compare me now to me then, I probably do half to a quarter of the paperwork I did then, just to give you an indicator of how much more you have to do when you're interfacing with these systems that don't serve us. But anyway, that's a tangent aside. I felt like I was failing because I couldn't interact with it, and I thought it was the ADHD at first. And so I got diagnosed. I got my meds for a little while because I felt like my meds were I can show you the world, because it was just a whole new lens. That was how it was. And for a little while, I could cope with that system better, or the systems around me with work better. But then after that novelty wore off, the PDA came knocking again. And I was like, oh yeah, that's still a problem. And I repeated to go back to the way things were even before I got medication. I was just faster. Oh, goodness. So I just had these struggles that kept coming back and was wearing me down and was burning me out because it wasn't for me. I was doing a lot of work that didn't serve my client or didn't serve me as a clinician, just work to do work. And that just really grinded my gears. And insert Fox, they were also struggling with their own work and navigating systems they'd never experienced before. And they were thinking that they were autistic. And so we're sitting on the couch and I'm talking with them and they're talking about their struggles, and they say how their brain will just never shut up and just keeps going. And they felt like they had just so much thing going all at once. And I'm like, darling, non-ADHD brains don't do that. The brain can be quiet for neurotypical people. And they're like, no, that's fake. And it's no, it's real. A brain can be quiet. And that convinced them that they have ADHD. But on that same token, the reason we were talking were to figure out our stuff. And they had this book, So You Think You're Autistic, or something to that effect. I'll put the book on screen. And at the beginning, there's similar to what I was listing about my experience with being autistic. There's a practical examples of what it means to be autistic, basically extrapolating out the DSM criteria in a more practical way. And he decided to go through the book and initial the things we related to. It was RIA childhood, RIA now, these were had all of these little initials, and Fox did the same thing. And we were like, dang, that looks pretty autistic, I might say. And then we took the RAADS-R, which is a lovely test that is both reliable and valid to indicate if you're autistic. And the trick is, because it is a very conservative test, is to not take it like you're prepared. For example, there's a joke in the community. It's like, oh, I don't have a problem with socks. I have a system. That kind of thing. Like, what is the base you without your systems? If I were to pluck you from some random Tuesday and sit you down and have you take the test, like, that's how you're supposed to take it. Sometimes we get stuck with being so literal minded. It's like, well, there are times that I have experienced this, but I usually don't. So I guess I'll say never true, like that kind of thing. And you have to not say you have to game the test. That's not what you're supposed to do. It's just, it's more, is this enough to limit your function? Like, is this limiting you occasionally or back when you were 16? Because that's how the test is structured. Because often, like me, as we age, sometimes when you're at low support needs, you can feel like, I don't have that struggle anymore. But you're secretly causing all of the like bandwidth problems and like burning yourself out for compensating. So that is how I figured out that I was autistic. Now you might be noticing, Rhea, you're not talking about getting a formal diagnosis. You're talking about a reliable and valid, but ultimately an online test and doing a bunch of research and a book and like all of these things. And it's like, yeah, I know. That's exactly what I'm saying. I am professionally autistic, but I have not been formally diagnosed because self-diagnosis is one valid for this type of thing because it's a neurotype. It's something that you are, not something that you experience. Like as a, how would I describe it? How it's different? Like a mood disorder is different from a neurotype. I think the difference is this is a developmental thing that has always been there. You notice I've been talking about things throughout my lifespan. That's why it's more valid to self-diagnose with this type of thing. A mood disorder is something that can come and go, like be something that like enters your life at a later point, as an example. Same thing with an anxiety disorder, although a lot of, and I guess this is another indicator, I'm just like listing things like random, y'all. I had social anxiety because I always felt like I was playing chess with people. And so, yes, I had an anxiety thing my whole life. But again, it's keyword. I had it basically my whole life. You can have anxiety that is not related to neurodivergence for most of your life, but it's about like fundamentally how the wiring is laid rather than like if I could just like treat the anxiety, then it would be gone. I have to accommodate my disability, and that's how I'm not socially anxious anymore. That's the difference. And I would love to talk to you more about that if you want. In any Ask a Therapist video, if you want to ask me, like, well, how do you overcome social anxiety when you're autistic? Then maybe I'll answer that. Wink, wink. But yeah, I know I'm autistic. Granted, I do have the cheat code that I am a professional, so I have a lot of knowledge about it, and therefore, like, I can be more sure in that. And there's also this concept of soft diagnosis. What does that mean? Well, psychological texting, I sound like I said texting, oh god. Psychological testing is a thing where you have to spend a bunch of money to get tested by typically a psychologist around certain mental stuff. And insurance doesn't want to pay for it, especially for adults, because they see autism as a developmental disorder. And if you were able to get through childhood without it impacting you, then no, why would we pay for that? You're fine. You're fine. And so testing can be a thing that's really difficult to acquire. It was for me. I always, until very recently, had not so great insurance. And so that was not something that was on the cards for me. And if you are a minority, especially if you have socialization that isn't the typical, like, little boy with autism, they're not going to see it a lot of the time because that's not what their books, like, have indicators for. And so you can spend a bunch of money out of pocket and then be told you're not autistic when really, like, you've done all this research and you know how to paint all of this. And, there's also, as I've said in previous videos, good reasons to not have a formal diagnosis if you're afraid it will affect your access to gender-affirming care or have other medical discrimination, which is like people will triage autistic people at a lower degree because we're seen as not as valuable. So there can be very good reasons to not get a formal diagnosis. So that's why soft diagnosis can be an option. And what that is you work with a master's level clinician, someone like me, to eliminate all the things that aren't autism and to basically be like, yep, you're pretty sure you're autistic. And that's how you can kind of get like tested without getting tested, because basically you've eliminated all of the things like trauma as the reason you're like this, or depression, anxiety, like all of these things that can kind of look like autism if like, especially when you only have low support needs. Like if, like, for example, you're treating your trauma, you're working through your depression, you're working through your anxiety, and you still have these issues where you feel like you're playing chess just when you socialize, then yeah, like there's a good indicator that you're autistic. And I guess that's what I'll leave you on, is that you don't have to be formally diagnosed to be a part of this community. Like there's this, I don't remember the TikToker who said this, so put it in the comments if you know this guy, but he was like, if you want to be this thing that society says is this supposedly this terrible thing, and like you did all this hard work to figure out if you're this thing and you think you're this thing, then like, golly gee willikers, like you're welcome at my table. Like we don't do this for fun or pity or whatever. It's for trying to understand ourselves so we can better accommodate ourselves. Like my life now, because I have my sensory kit that I've talked about before, and one day I guess I will like dig through the bag and show you everything that's in it, makes my life so much better than it was before I had it. When I understand now how to socialize differently in a more direct and clear way about how I feel, it's life-changing compared to what I did before. And that's why I wanted to share, because if you have if this sounds like you, I'd like you to consider looking into that, so that way you can learn from my experience. Well, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I'd like in the comments you to maybe put another wave emoji, like, because I love the ocean. It's one of my comfort spaces. That's why you might see me in VR at oceans a lot. I want you to put a wave emoji and describe all of the like things that you did when you were a kid, or a young adult even, that indicated, oh gosh, I should have known that I was autistic because of this reason. And maybe we can get a long list of experience for people to like look through when they're trying to make the decision whether they are or aren't, and things that they can like bring this stuff. It's like, I do all of these things to like, their therapist, so maybe they can try to get a soft diagnosis if psychological testing is either undesirable or inaccessible, so they can help learn. And frankly, if you like relate and it's useful, it really doesn't matter if you're autistic or not. Use it to help you function. But anyway, thank you so much. Share the video, subscribe. I love y'all. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye now. Welcome to the magic place of the ink card. I want to give a shout out to the people doing fan art and my $5 plus patrons you see here. Will you please subscribe and ring the bell as well? Check out this video here next. Please do it for me, sweetie. Mwah.